Mathematician, and I also have Ted Gong with me, who is the executive director of the 1882 Foundation. And I'm also joined by my colleague Lauren Ng, who will be co-moderating tonight's talk story. And of course, I forget to introduce myself. My name is Yilin Zhang, and I'll also be co-hosting tonight's talk story. So before I get started, I just want to say, everyone, feel free to write something in the chat. If you joined earlier, you heard us talking about where we're zooming in from. I'm in Washington, D.C. Stephanie is in New York, and Lauren is on the West Coast. So let us know where you're zooming in from and how you heard about the 1882 Foundation if you're new here. And before I get started, though, I do want to pass it to Ted, our executive director, to say a few words of welcome. Ted, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, thank you. I didn't expect to say a few words, but it's good. Always have the opportunity. And it's such a wonderful time to meet up with good friends again. Stephanie, hello, how are you? I'm waiting. I'm eager to hear what you have to say and hear the conversation. So I want to welcome everybody to our Talk Story series. We're going to try to do more of these type of things, and there'll be a whole lineup of different things that come. So watch for our different announcements. I think this weekend we're also having a in-person visit to the Congressional Cemetery, see Range 99, and as part of the Qingming commemoration. It's a little bit late, but we're going to be doing that. And we have a number of other things coming up, including in July and August, the celebration of National Historic Landmark status for the Summit Tunnel, railroad tunnels, and that's a very big occasion. So all you guys save up your money, come up to California and see us in Sacramento for that big celebration. So pass it back to you guys and Stephanie and
Yeah, thank you, Ted.
Edith.
Yeah, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but there's a lot of wonderful things happening at the 1882 Foundation. So wanted to make sure that you guys hear that, in addition to us speaking to the wonderful Stephanie Chou tonight. So I'm going to kick us off, and then Lauren and I will be co-moderating, as I mentioned before. And as I first kicked off, so tonight's conversation is a conversation with Stephanie Chou, who many of us actually met some months ago. She performed at the Kennedy Center for us, so we were really lucky to see that performance. Stephanie is multi-talented. She is a saxophonist, singer, composer, and mathematician. And I'm just going to read a brief synopsis of her biography. So, Stephanie Chu is a Chinese American jazz composer, saxophonist, singer who blends influences from her Chinese heritage with Western jazz and pop to create a bracingly original sound. She's performed at the Carnegie Hall, Lincoln Center, Joe's Pub, and in festivals around the world, where her music creates immediate cross cultural connections. Stephanie's albums include Prime Knot and Asymptote, which focused on jazz reinventions of classic Chinese folk songs. Her ballet, C for G, was commissioned by ABT ballerina Susan Jeff. And a studio recording of Comfort Girl will be released in 2025, which we will be talking a little bit about toward the end, so I won't reveal too many details. And Stephanie has a BA in mathematics from Columbia University and grew up in New York. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thanks so much for having me, Lynn and Ted, and it's great to be here and on the Talk Story with 1882 Foundation. I was so lucky to be able to perform at the Kennedy Center for the Lunar New Year celebration a few months ago, and that was really special for me and the band. So thank you guys again for having us. Yeah, so
Thank you. Thank you again for performing at the Kennedy Center and for being with us tonight. So as I said earlier, you have an interesting blend of skills. You use both the left side and the right side of your brain with the creative music and the mathematician part. So I can't say that I'm lucky enough to have both of those strong suits. So why don't you share with our audience a little bit about your background, your upbringing, how you got to where you are today?
Sure. So I grew up in Westchester County in around New York, and I'm sort of 2.5 generation. My mom is from Taiwan and grew up there, moved to the US when she was in her 20s, and my dad's parents are from Hong Kong and Shandong. So he was born and raised in Philadelphia. And I'm kind of, so yeah, 1.5 or 2.5, depending on how you look at it. I Chinese culture and history was definitely part of my upbringing. So I went to Chinese school on Saturday mornings, um, where we had, language. It was instructional language, but also we had tests and homework. And I'm sure many of you here can relate to that experience. And the math. So I always played music. I started out playing piano when I was 5. I started on the alto saxophone when I was 10, and mostly spent my middle school and high school years studying Western classical music. Um, and then later on, sort of became introduced to, fell in love with jazz. And then in college, I continued to play music. So it wasn't that I had a dramatic change in sort of life focus. I had always been playing. And it wasn't until sometime in the middle of college that I decided I wanted to pursue music professionally. So I did finish my BA in math and have used it subsequently for not just creative projects, but also just living as an artist in New York City. I was a math tutor for many, many years and an academic tutor. So that's sort of a little bit about my overall background. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, and when we were thinking about themes and things like that to talk about at tonight's talk story,
Mhm.
we talked about the Chinese American identity and you growing up and pursuing the sciences and the mathematics part, and then it does seem like it's a gradual process because, as you said, you've been involved in music, playing music in different aspects for many years. How did your family take the transition? Were they initially supportive, and were they confused by the change? What was that like?
So I think my particular path is different from a lot of other, even Chinese American musicians who grew up here. For example, I was not one of these virtuosic players who, from the time they're 5 or 10, you can tell that they're gonna be, conservatory bound, and that is their thing. Like music performance for me, even though I am doing it professionally now, I was never, as a kid, extremely, it was never, I was never extremely, at the top end of like performance, just put it that way. So, my parents, my dad's a psychiatrist and my mom was a software consultant for many years. And they both have more traditional, non-creative jobs. And I, what prompted me to pursue music professionally was actually a study abroad year that I did, or a study abroad summer that I did in Beijing, between my sophomore and junior year of college. And that was life changing because it was the first time I had really experienced playing music with people who don't speak English. So I was over there, studying Chinese, yes, but I mostly spent most of my time hanging out with the local jazz musicians there, which is a whole sort of bubble scene in and of itself. But anyways, playing night after night for audiences who didn't speak English, that was the first time I had ever really felt the power of music as universal language. And after that summer, I just came back home and was like, I want to pursue this professionally. My parents were shocked and they were not supportive, and they were like, what are you doing, we sent you to private school and we sent you to Columbia and you have a degree and you're gonna finish your math degree, but You know, they thought that over time I might change my mind or like get some sense into my head, you know, like they kind of were hoping that I would change my mind, and certainly were just in disbelief for a few years. And then over time, as I've had more success and just they realized I wasn't going to change my mind or pursue something else, they have since now they're very supportive. But it took, I don't know, 15 years or something. So that my evolution towards whatever career and like compositional voice and sound and musical identity that I've had has been gradual for over time. And so has their sort of acceptance of this and reaction to what I'm doing. So now, I mean, you know, we went from not being able to talk about it at all to now I talk to my dad sometimes about specific projects or, you know, what to see. So we're sometimes creative collaborators too. So yeah, but again, very unusual, I suppose. I think every path in music or anybody with a creative path has of course a different story as well. Yeah, but I definitely wasn't one of those kids who did competitions or was conservatory bound or anything like that when I was in high school.
No, thank you for explaining that. I mean, I think for some of our audience, and especially for the younger generation, uh, I mean, what advice would you have? Because there's a point where if it's something like in this case, creative or music, it's a hobby, but at what point does that hobby or passion become, at what point do you make that decision to say, oh, I want to take that on professionally? Like, what advice would you give for someone who is just starting out, maybe in their 20s, and considering, oh, do I go into the sciences, or I have this love for music? At what
Mhm.
point should it feel like, okay, I should really invest in this and dive deep into this?
That's a difficult question, and it's something I do get asked pretty often, especially from Chinese American parents who may be dealing with their kids kind of going through these uh, changes or issues or just considerations. I would say that my main advice is to only pursue something professionally. I would only advise somebody to pursue music or any sort of creative field professionally if they have to do it. If they don't feel like, not even that they don't think they can do anything else, because if you ask a lot of people in music, they'll say it's the only thing I could do. But I would open that up to say it's the only that you can't live without it. You can't. It has to be this feeling of like you can't live with yourself if you didn't try or you didn't explore this or you didn't take it as far as it could go. So otherwise there's tremendous risk involved. There's a lot of sacrifice, of course. So that's kind of what I would say. But how do you get there, right? How do you know? For some, if you're 20 and you just graduated college, or even if you're young, you might not really know. So sometimes depending on the person, I might say, well, maybe take a year or two and just go all in and see how it feels, see what you learned, and see how you react to it. For other people, they kind of are able to do certain things, like maybe they'll have a day job and do music on the side, and at some point the one overtakes the other. Or some people like myself, I did various part-time jobs. Math tutoring was one of them. And I also did some music industry related work, like I was a copyist, for example, which is doing like music, making the sheet music look the way it should for other composers. So there's ways to sort of check things out without going all in. I would say it depends on the amount of risk you feel you can take, and also depends on whoever I'm giving advice to, like what else is important to them in the rest of their life. Like,
Yeah.
do they want stability, financial stability? Do they really care about being in the same place all the time? All these different factors. So, yeah, but generally the advice would be try to understand what it means to you. What does creating music or working on whatever we're talking about here, what does that mean to you? And that will change and evolve over time. But I feel like as long as somebody has a good handle on what the place of that creative practice is in their life and what they're looking to get from it and how they're growing from it, everything else kind of falls into place. And that's a lot easier said than done. But I think that's, for me, that's like the sort of guidepost, of how I make certain decisions.
That is excellent advice. I mean, it's a very personal decision. It's very complex, but I think you put it well in that you have to understand what is music to you, and can you live without it? Do you need to live with it? And I think that's the same thing I've heard from people who have pursued music full on, is that I cannot do anything else. I have to do this. It is this internal drive that you feel. And your success is something that has been accumulated over time. And a lot of people, when they see successful people in these professions, it feels like it's overnight, but in reality, it's a lot of hard work that has taken some time from your early years all the way until now. So now I'm going to pass it to my colleague Lauren, who herself has a musical family. And so Lauren is going to delve a little bit more into the musical aspect and other parts with Stephanie. So Lauren, go ahead.
Yes, you were just mentioning how some people say, wow, I feel this is the only thing that I can do. Music is like the language for me. And I definitely relate to that when seeing my own brother, who is also a jazz musician, and him speaking about the same things. So I was curious also about your own beginnings in the music industry. You mentioned that you started off as classical and then you took a trip to China that influenced your decision into going into jazz. So I'm curious, was that the biggest factor? Were there any other factors that influenced that transition, and why?
Oh yeah, so I started out studying classical music, and I certainly love that and still love that. In high school, when I was introduced to jazz, especially as a saxophone player, it's like this whole world opens up, and improvisation and this whole other language. For a long time, I was very interested in classical saxophone, which is a whole thing that's separate. I don't know, a lot of people don't know about it, but there are concertos for classical saxophone that you can play with orchestra, and there is a whole body of work that developed. It's just not as well known as, what people think of as jazz saxophone or pop saxophone. So anyway, when I started learning more about jazz, and then playing in jazz ensembles in college and a little bit in high school, but mostly in college, the whole world of improvisation and the language of jazz is really what I fell in love with. And then, yes, going to China was a big shift in terms of deciding that I wanted to pursue this career full time. But I still didn't know what that looked like. So now I'm 21 or something, and I just graduated from college, and I don't have this idea of like, what is my artistic voice? What is my compositional sound? I was just trying to sort of be a saxophone player, or trying to look at, okay, if I do this music business internship, I was just sort of exploring, what does it mean now to be a working musician in New York? Because at the time, it's way different than the sort of idealized scene that we learned about, where people go to jam sessions until 4 a.m. and there's music everywhere, and there's a lot of work for musicians. It's just like, as streaming and such, there's just, the whole industry has changed itself. So stylistically, I also created what I consider to be like my signature sound, or the type of music that I most often perform, which is this blend of Chinese influences, some vocals in Mandarin, some in English. I've got the erhu player in my band, plus a jazz rhythm section. So this whole sound did not it wasn't something I thought of in my head and then executed. And it also wasn't something that I came up with overnight. This took many years to develop. And it was really at the suggestion of a couple of my mentors. Because I hadn't really incorporated my Chinese heritage into my music at all before that. I was writing like straight ahead jazz tunes and like pop tunes and singer-songwriter songs. And two of my main mentors, one of them is Alan Toussaint, who is a great New Orleans songwriter, piano player, singer. And then another one of my primary teachers, Patrick Zimmerly, who is a saxophone player and a composer. They sort of suggested like, well, why don't you investigate your heritage and figure out a way to maybe incorporate that into your music? And it seemed so obvious, but I had overlooked it, or I just didn't consider it. But when they said that, I'm like, oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I went back and started to think about these childhood influences, things that I learned, going to the Chinese school that I mentioned, or from my parents, or just sounds and things that I had grown up with and taken for granted. I sort of went back and tried to imagine how could I incorporate this stuff into my music. So now it's like 2012, 2010, 2012. I'm working on exploring this. We're doing shows with my band and trying, different experimentations of like how to put this together. And then it wasn't really until I started singing that really put everything together. Because I should mention, I did not grow up singing. I started studying voice when I was 25. So coming at singing as an adult is also just it's a different path than a lot of singers. And I would say I come at it from a very instrumentalist and composer's point of view. So anyway, the whole trajectory I feel like it's very organic, but as Elin was saying, it's taken like my whole life to get here. And but that's kind of, I also feel like this is advice I give composers sometimes, which is you really can't, the most honest music you can create is you have to be honestly representing yourself. Like you can't really, some people can fake some things, but this general idea of like, whoever you are is going to come out in your playing, whether that's your singing, your improvisation, your compositions, at some point or another, it's going to come out. And then I think the most successful way to distill that is to like embrace all of your influences and then figure out, how that's going to manifest itself. But I think that's really important, especially for younger people, to sort of realize that like the stuff that you're chasing isn't out there. It's already in here. The work is going in here and figuring out what you can create from that. So yeah,
That's so
that was
true.
long.
Yeah, no, it does sound like authenticity is all a part of the artwork. It's like all interwoven into what you do, as well as your inspiration for creating the work that you do as well. You mentioned earlier that some of your music was it was inspired by Chinese school. I remember that you have a song related to eating grapes. Is that
Yeah. So right, exactly. So one of my something I learned as a kid is the tongue twister, 吃葡萄吐葡萄皮，不吃葡萄不吐葡萄皮. And I decided to try to make that into a song. So later on in the song, it's an improvised duet between voice and drum kit. And then, we improvise on like colors of grapes and we do different rhythms and things. And we take the tongue twister and put it, make it its own thing. And every time I do a show, people want to hear that piece. And that's that means a lot to me. It's a lot of fun. Sorry, I was reading somebody's question. What was your exact question? Oh, how do I specifically create those things? Those
My
blends?
question?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was more so curious about the inspiration for your compositions, such as that composition, as well as how did you think of combining your jazz and your Chinese influences?
Oh, like the nuts and bolts of how I actually did that. Okay, so for each
Yeah.
one, it's different. In the case of the tongue twister, I thought of, okay, well, it's rhythmic, and I like percussive vocals and these things with drums anyway. So I figured, okay, well, how could we incorporate those things together? And then we experimented on like repeating certain things with a certain rhythm and just being silly. And then over time, as we went in to make the recording, we decided like certain little cells that we were going to hit. For something else, like for example, I have an arrangement of Kang Bing Chinga, Kang Bing Love Song. And I knew when I wrote that arrangement that I wanted to do something that was different from the original, in a jazz-ish context, featured the erhu, and kind of had a different harmonic palette than how the song is normally presented. I also do a version of Teresa Teng's in The Moon Represents My Heart. And for that one specifically, I knew, since that is such a popular song, I wanted to do a completely different take on it. So I did an English translation. We completely changed the harmony. So instead of it being this sort of vanilla ballad, I completely changed the style and made it more like a pop / jazz kind of thing. But then I was like wanting to incorporate a quote from the song The Yi People in there. So but each one of these things, again, it's not like I sat down and said, oh, I imagined the whole thing and then it came out. It's sort of like you take one idea or one song and doing an arrangement, and I'm like, okay, and you kind of play with it, and I think about, well, what do I want to do, and how much of an arrangement do I want to make it? Like for me personally, I really like arrangements that are very different from the original version in some way. Otherwise, to me, it's just a cover, and there's nothing wrong with doing a cover or doing a great arrangement of the original treatment of the song. That's totally fine. And that's already hard enough. So for these specific things, I wanted to try to do something different, or make it my own somehow in some new way. So that's like what I'm often seeking to do. I see a question here. Do you have a distinctive Chinese or Asian sound in your work, such as Cape? Okay. I think I do have a distinctive Asian sound in my work, and it could be described as sometimes it's, you know, singing in Chinese, in Mandarin, that I incorporate the erhu a lot in some of my arrangements. So that's got, you know, the distinctive sort of traditional sound, although I do use it in an unfamiliar context, an unusual context sometimes. Like you don't often hear an erhu playing with a rhythm section. And then sometimes the influences are just Asian, as far as the harmonic influences or the overall like themes of the pieces or the feelings of the pieces. Is there a genre? Yes. I mean, I guess it depends. Is there a recognized genre in the business? Well, yes and no. I mean, there's world music, which is a very broad genre, if you could call that. I don't think there is no specific Asian jazz like in this kind of thing. You can have jazz performed by Asian musicians. That's different than sort of what I consider what I do more of like a fusion. So yeah, as far as in the business and being recognized in the business, this type of music falls between a lot of things. Like it's not straight ahead jazz. It's not really it's not the kind of thing that is considered vocal jazz the way a lot of mainstream people think about what is vocal jazz either. So, and I actually, you know, the easiest way to describe it is jazz, but I don't even really consider it jazz in the sense of like my music doesn't usually incorporate a lot of improvisation. When I was younger, it did. It's just sort of what happened over time to become more song oriented. So yeah, that's the hard. I hope I answered your question. Is there such a recognized genre in the business? Yes and no. Yeah, and I'm all about sort of paving my own way in music, but that was really out of necessity, and in life. But the reason I say that's out of necessity in my music is because I am not, what's the best way to put this? creating what I now look back on and consider, oh, my own sound or whatever. That's something that was out of necessity, because if you want, as a composer, if you're not, unless you have, your work doesn't live. Okay, if you're a composer, your work doesn't live beyond the piece of paper unless somebody's performing it. And like the easiest way to get it performed is to put a group of people together yourself and do it. And that's kind of like, just generally speaking, that's kind of what I learned over time and what I've focused on, because it's also easier in the sense of like, there's just fewer people involved. Let's say you want to be an orchestral composer or something. Well, then you got to make sure you have an orchestra who's going to play the pieces. There's just different avenues in the business to go into depending on what you want to do. And I have focused on small group, like less than 10 musicians, stuff where I'm the band leader. And I'm just bringing this up to say that there are so many other avenues in music as well, that do not look like this. But the real impetus for me personally is I perform and record and do music as a vehicle for my compositions. So that's like really where my personal interest is. That's very different from somebody who's, say, a performer who doesn't write at all, is an extremely high level performer, and maybe their interest and whole career in music is on performing other people's pieces and executing them at a very, very high level. And that's what they're really into. So, yeah, that I just bring that up because for me, it was out of necessity, both career-wise and just personal necessity, because if you're not there, it's generally true that if you don't play your own compositions and get them out there and create the opportunities for them, nobody else is going to do that. I mean, unless you already know, like at the beginning, you have to be the one doing it as a composer and a band leader.
Absolutely, that definitely makes sense. And hearing your original pieces at the Kennedy Center, I can absolutely say that I never heard anything like them, the way that they combine, yeah, the Chinese instrumental with the jazz, with the pop. It was definitely a great way to make the celebration. And on that, we'll kick it off to Eileen, who will share about, or who will ask about your industry experience, maybe what it was like being in it and delving into that.
Thank you so much, Lauren. And this is actually a great segue because as we can see, we're getting audience questions about your type of music, what it sounds like. So I think this is a great time for us to share I think it's is it grapes? Yes.
Sure, yeah. We could do the grapes tongue twister.
Yeah. So for those of you who haven't heard this one yet, we'd like to share it, and our colleague Ellen is going to pull it up. So bear with us for a moment. And then please also keep your questions coming in the chat, and we'll take them as they come through and also at the end. So go ahead, Ellen.
吃葡萄吐葡萄皮，不吃葡萄不吐葡萄皮，吃葡萄吐葡萄皮，不吃葡萄不吐葡萄皮。你吃不吃葡萄？你吃不吃葡萄？吃不吃葡萄？吃不吃葡萄？吃不吃不吃葡萄？不吃葡萄？吃不吃？吃不吃？吃不吃？不吃不吃？吃不吃？吃不吃？不吃葡萄？ 吐葡萄，吃葡萄，吐葡萄，吐葡萄，吐葡萄，吐葡萄，吐葡萄，吐葡萄皮。黑葡萄，黑葡萄，红葡萄，红葡萄。黑葡萄，红葡萄，黄葡萄，黑红黄绿。黑葡萄，红葡萄，黄葡萄，绿葡萄，绿葡萄，绿葡萄，绿葡萄，黑红黄绿蓝，黑红黄绿蓝绿蓝白白。里面有没有籽籽？里面有没有籽籽？ 里面有没有？里面有没有？有没有？有没有？有没有？有没有？有没有？有没有？有没有？有没有？有没有？有没有？有没有？有没有？滋滋滋滋。不吐葡萄，不吐。 桃，不吐葡萄，不吐葡萄，不吐葡萄，不吐葡萄皮。我吃葡萄，他吃葡萄，你吃葡萄，我们都吃葡萄，谁吃他吃你吃，我们都吃葡萄。我吃葡萄，他吃葡萄，你吃葡萄，他吃我吃你吃，他吃我们都吃，他吃你吃，我们都吃，谁吃你吃？他吃我吃你吃，他吃我吃你吃，他吃我吃你吃，他吃我吃你吃，他吃我吃你吃，他吃我吃你吃，吃不吃你吃不吃你吃不吃你吃不吃，吃葡萄吐葡萄皮，不吃葡萄不吐葡萄皮，不吃葡萄皮不吐葡萄皮，吃不吃不吃吃不吃黑黄的黑黄的黑黄的，吃他吃你吃不吃他吃你吃不吃他吃你吃不吃他吃你吃不吃吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃不吃 吃葡萄吐葡萄皮，不吃葡萄不吐葡萄皮，吃葡萄吐葡萄皮，不吃葡萄不吐葡萄皮。Thank you guys so much. Eating grapes, Rana and Itzik.
I was watching that and I was just smiling because it's both fun to watch and listen. So I'm sure our audience had a similar response as I did. Do you want to share a little bit about that creative process, Stephanie? How you how you were inspired by that, what that was like?
Sure. I'm glad you guys like this piece. Thank you all for your comments, Amy, Lauren. I mean, that is not that version is not that different than where it started. Like the first attempt in my head of like, okay, what could this be? Um, the drums part, I mean, that's just, I had no idea exactly, but I sort of came up with these rhythms like da 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 da, da, da. Like I came up with rhythmic like ways to set the different words in a specific rhythm that I just liked. And then I my Chinese is pretty limited. So I think I have the equivalent of maybe like a second grade level. So I pretty much expended all of the Chinese that I knew that I could come up with related to grapes. I'm like, oh, what can I say that I know? Well, some colors, like, are there seeds inside? Like, that's the extent of my, ability to even discuss grapes. So then based on that limitation, which is always fun, by the way, to have do things with limitations, because that's a lot of times where like some of the really most interesting music comes out of, like doing limitation exercises where you say, oh, we're only going to use this, or you can't go past this, like what can you create within that. So that piece, but we've been performing it for like more than 10 years. I think we've been performing it for maybe 13 years or something. And sometimes I've thought about, well, could I do it again? Should I do another tongue twister? And this time maybe have the entire band do like hits, like have the rhythms be in unison, like something like that. But anyway, yeah, that creative process. And then I brought it to this drummer who, not the drummer in the video, the drummer on the recording has a lot of, he specializes in making homemade percussion. So on the studio recorded version, there's like all these homemade instruments that you'll hear. So it's a drum kit plus these other things, which are just part of his signature sound. His name is Kenny Wallison, and he makes Wallisonics, all these instruments. So yeah, it just kind of evolved over time. That I have not been asked that though in a long time, so it's nice to think about. I'm suddenly brought back to my previous apartment and like where I was at the time. Just, it was a complete exploration. It was like a kid playing with paint or something, because I had never done anything like that before musically. So it was just like, let's play with stuff and figure out what works. And then as each performance went on, it got tighter and tighter and more better. Yeah,
That's great. I just love hearing about people's creative process because everyone has a very unique approach about how they get to the end product. And as I'm reflecting on our conversations earlier between Lauren and I and yourself, some themes popped up. We talked about music being an authentic expression of yourself, of your voice. And we've had audience questions about, is there a genre for the type of music that you create? And if not, there isn't, so you trailblazed, you created this unique genre. And also, I want to emphasize the different skill sets you have to use in order to be a performer, a band leader, a composer. Those all take unique skill sets. And, usually people do one, not necessarily all three. So it really takes a lot of, I guess, creative juices in many different aspects. So, with that said, you creating this genre and also being an Asian American woman in the jazz industry in New York City. Can you share a little bit about what that was like and the support for Asian American women in jazz? And did you have, we touched a little bit about influences, musical influences, but do you have mentors that, you could discuss? And really, how did you find these individuals?
Oh, that's a great question. Before I answer that, I just want to address Stan's comment. Like, thank you. I really appreciate what you said about. I hope that you can blaze a new genre that will inspire other Chinese jazz. Yeah. So I have to say, when I started out, again, I wasn't thinking about uh, inspiring other people. I was really just trying to find my way, and we're still kind of all doing that, I think. So it's always really special for me to be involved in situations like this where I get a chance to share with other people, maybe give advice or influence the next generation, etc. Because it just doesn't. It's like a nice bonus, right? I was a math teacher for a long time, but this is like teaching stuff, talking about stuff that is just part of I appreciate the opportunity. It's always special for me to talk about stuff like this. So this question of Asian American jazz musician mentors. So there's a lot more support now than there was 15 years ago. And so 15 years ago, the people who were my mentors growing up, like there was a lot less support for them as well when they were coming up. So I don't think I really have a specific Asian American jazz mentor, really. I mean, I can certainly list colleagues and other people who have influenced my work, who are known in the New York scene, but I didn't like study with them, or I don't think I ever really actually, sought them out in terms of like a mentor mentee type of relationship. So I guess it's again sort of like this trailblazing thing, which it's not like I had a model for who I wanted to model my career after. I will say that in the Bay Area jazz scene, with the Bay Area Asian American jazz scene, which is pretty strong and has been going since like the 60s and 70s. It's that I think there's a lot more like presence and more community around that. Whereas here in New York, there is more community now, but certainly before there wasn't. So, and I don't really think that I even know half of the like Asian American jazz musicians out there. But there have been events where we've gotten together, and like somebody that I know hosted a panel specifically about this in one of the schools nearby, in one of the high schools nearby. And so I met some other musicians through things like that. But as far as being a woman in jazz or in the music industry, and then an Asian American in the music industry, I get asked this a lot, and I can't really specifically tell you that it was harder because of this, or I lost this opportunity because of one of those things. Because you don't really know about the opportunities you're not getting, or the venues that don't call you back, or the band leaders that don't call you back for certain things. It's kind of hard to know what you're missing from things like that. So yeah, I also think that there's a lot more community now, and it's if for somebody coming up now in New York, I think there's just so much more support for different backgrounds coming into this music, or trying, you know, like just different support systems. Like I can, off the top of my head, I can think of, well, here's a group that does mentorship for women, and here's a group that does mentorship for like just different things that are very specific to jazz, and even within certain subgenres of jazz, like creative jazz or big band, or, you know, like even within that. So I think that's going on in all different facets of the music industry. So yeah, but if you're specifically asking me what challenges have I faced, I don't know. I don't really know what the challenges specifically were, if they were specifically related to being Asian American or woman. I think that actually they were all more related to just the musicianship, or you know, whatever I was doing that day. I've also had more attention for, it goes both ways. Like maybe you miss opportunities, but maybe you get more attention because you look different, or there aren't a lot of female Asian American saxophone players out there, you know, like so I don't even really think about those things very much. I just try to keep doing the work and get looking for the opportunities or whatever. But yeah, but it is something I get asked a lot.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing, Stephanie. And we, before we get to Ted's question, I'll let
Okay.
Stephanie read that. But I know our audience is probably curious to see a wider breadth of your work.
Sure, yeah.
Show the Asymptote trailer now, and then after that we'll get to Ted's question. So Ellen, fire away.
My name is Stephanie Chou. I'm a saxophone player, singer, and composer based in New York.
It has this Chinese kind of element to it. It's mysterious, and that's what's cool about it. I mean, it's human.
I haven't really heard anything quite like this mixture yet. She has a little bit of a pop influence, and she's got the Chinese thing, the jazz thing.
I decided to try to explore my heritage and my roots and combining traditional Chinese music in a jazz setting.
One day, Steph just asked me to meet up. She wanted to know how the erhu sounds and how she can produce instrument in her compositions.
I thought about all of my early memories of being Chinese in America today. Tongue twisters, traditional melodies, things that were so ingrained into my mind as a young kid that I've never forgotten them. How can you doubt my love for you? You know it's always the same. My kisses are pure, I've always been sure. In the moon you'll see my heart. You ask me how my pure love shines. How many ways can I show? From sea to shore, I've said it all before. In the moon you'll see my heart.
That's great. Well, that's a good segue to jamming with other musicians, and Ted's question is specifically around jamming with other Chinese American musicians and perhaps a distinct sound coming from that. So, Stephanie, can you take Ted's question?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I have jammed with other Chinese American musicians in New York in jazz and otherwise, for sure, like in classical, pop, other genres. And I've also done it in Asia, in Beijing. There's a small scene there of jazz that's like half local musicians and half expats. Not all from here, but a lot of them are from the US and some from Europe and other countries that have moved there. And they've grown this very unusual Chinese jazz scene that's happening in Shanghai and Beijing and in Hong Kong. I could do a whole discussion on that. But just as far as playing with other people, is there a distinct sound that comes out of that? I think there could be, and there certainly would be. And what would it be? So this makes me think about the Bay Area scene, which when that developed was very much tied to the African American power movement in the 60s and 70s. So you got a lot of like hip hop blended with Chinese influences happening there. And I think that sound is very specific to that region and that time period. And I'm very broadly speaking here, but that's kind of what came out of that. If we're talking about, is there maybe a distinctive like New York or East Coast Chinese American jazz? And that would be really interesting. I don't know. I think that there would need to be more time. It still feels kind of young. Like as far as there is more collaboration happening among Asian musicians of all Asian cultures. And like I think that there's more collaboration happening in classical and other genres where they're like making their own sound or like a scene of something that's that. And I think it would probably take another 10 or 20 years to like be able to look back and say, oh, here's the distinctive sound. What does that sound like? I don't know. I'm sure it sounds, if it's here, I'm sure it sounds a little bit like the jazz in New York, combined with like the, specific energy. I'd be curious to imagine what that could be. Like when you ask me, what does it sound like? I'm like, oh, I think I could kind of imagine what it could be. And so two things. There's, for example, in jazz, there's a distinctive like Scandinavian sound of saxophone playing, just bringing that up as an example. What does that actually sound like? And do Scandinavian saxophone players think that they sound like that? I think it's more just these labels or these categories that we've put onto certain things, and then we identify with them like in retrospect. Now, with specifically to, that would be really interesting. I mean, I've certainly played with other Chinese American musicians, but not specifically with the purpose of exploring like a specific sound that embodies a cultural perspective. It's a little bit more individual. Like, I don't know, this person's really into like this kind of storytelling, pansori or something, or this person's really into like, okay, I'm Korean American, but I really want to know what the stride piano thing is. Like, it sort of is more based on what the personal interests of the people are. But there is this little scene in Brooklyn. There's a newish jazz club there that specifically does Shanghai. It's very specific. It's called the Red Pavilion, and they have a big band or like a small jazz band where they're very specifically trying to bring back Shanghai jazz from the 1930s and 40s. So they're doing this exploration of shidaiqu, songs of our time. And that whole genre came out of this specific confluence in Shanghai of expats, before World War II, and this amalgamation of certain things that created this music that sounds like a combination of movie music plus early jazz, and then it's like in Chinese. So that it's not only that I thought about it because it's happening, there's this club that specializes in this in New York now, but it's also, that's like an example that I can think of that's very specific to like the time period and the confluences. And I probably something like that would happen here. Maybe we just don't know that it's happening yet, or maybe it'll be, later or something. But that's an interesting question. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And shidaiqu is one of my favorite. I take a lot of influences from that period into my own work.
Yeah, I mean, if we have anyone who is interested in jamming or wants to learn more, we may send them your
Oh
way.
yeah, sure, sure. I'm happy to talk to
You
anybody.
have a hub of creatives. We've had a Chinese American Women in History conference every couple
Right.
years, so we bring together creatives. So yeah, if we hear of any, we'll definitely pass them to you. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Lauren for one more question, and then we'll wrap up with your next step, Stephanie, and also take some audience questions. So I hope people can stay a little bit longer. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Lauren.
Yeah, so you have spoken about finding your way into the jazz industry as an Asian American female performing without many guideposts, especially as you described right now, how it's gonna have to continue and continue to strengthen over time. So, what was that experience like for you, and do you have any advice for others who are just starting in the industry?
You mean specifically if they're Asian Americans trying to navigate like the industry part of the music scene?
Yeah, yeah.
Advice. Well, I think it's good to both, it's going to sound contradictory. It's good to be open-minded about explore what you want to do. I'll just give you some examples. Let's say you're a singer or an actor or both. Maybe you want to maybe your ultimate goal is to be in a Broadway musical. There are many other things. Maybe you do readings for shows that are in production. Maybe you're interested in, well, there isn't a lot of session and commercial work, but when there used to be more, or maybe you never thought of it, maybe you're good at voiceover. Like there are just and that's just one little example. For me, let's say I was trying to be a saxophone player. Instead of leading my own band, here are some examples of things that you could do and get work with. Playing in other people's bands, playing in many other people's groups and being versatile, doubling on other instruments, and then say playing in a pit orchestra on Broadway, doing more theater gigs, of course teaching, and then like music industry related things, like some people that I know have been very successful at making videos on instructional videos or tutorials, or like I have a really good friend who's got this great learn jazz piano series, like books. So I'm sure if you talk to most people now in these fields, 10 years ago, they probably didn't imagine what they were doing now. Like my friend who's got this really successful book series, I don't think he ever thought that he would do that. If you asked him 10 years ago, 5 years, well, 10 years ago or longer ago. So I would say, so one thing is be very open and look for what could match your skill set. But at the same time, I think it's also very important to know what you're interested in. So it's good to explore, but it's important to cultivate, because you're going to be pushing the ball up the hill the whole way, and you're going to have to seek out opportunities that fit what you want to do. So just to give you an example, if you're a great sideman, meaning you're really good at playing in other people's bands, and maybe you're not interested in leading your own work, but your whole career is like playing with other people. Over time, you probably will become more selective about the type of music you want to work. Like you're not going to say yes to everything. So being more selective about what you want to work on, but that also takes this idea of, well, where do I want to go? So you're continually shaping where you want to go every step of the way. And that's hard to know. If you're just starting out, it can be really hard to know that unless you are just, unless like, I want to write orchestral music and that's it. I'm either doing that or not. So yeah, both being flexible, understanding your skill set is really important. I have to emphasize that. And obviously you can grow and develop more skills over time, both artistically, business side of things. But I think one place that people really struggle and where there can be a mismatch is if you do not understand it, if you don't really understand like how your skill set matches with what you're trying to do, whether that's globally or just in that one job, like the one specific thing that you're being asked to do in that moment. So yeah, that's my main advice. It's not very specific because I think everybody's path in music is so it's hard to be specific. I feel like it's hard to be more specific than that. Yeah.
This is such good advice. It sounds like
Oh,
being, yeah, I think that definitely makes sense. Just like being true to yourself and drawing on the skills that you know to be there, as well as your authentic self, just being your true
authentic self. And I'll give you an example. Like when I was 21, I wanted to be John Coltrane. Okay, I was like, I want to be John Coltrane. And at some point I accepted and acknowledged the fact that I'm not. But what I mean by that is like I'm not the most amazing improvising saxophone player. And I remember going through a shift where I had to just like, instead of trying to do something that I had already tried, like I spent many hours a day like trying to get there. And there were like kids who were much younger than me who were, way beyond. So at some point, and again, with the help of my teachers, we started to realize like, well, maybe this isn't like the best fit for what I can actually do. So it's a delicate balance of figuring out, well, how much of it is just like practice and effort to get to where you want to be, like in terms of performance or executing something that you've never done before. And some of it is also just assessing, well, I could spend like 20 years in the practice room and then maybe get to like some place that I wanted to be just on the saxophone. But in terms of like globally, at some point I decided and had to give up that idea, and then decided like, well, I want to explore this other thing, and like what can I contribute, what is actually a match for who I am, and like what can I actually contribute in a way that will lead to the most success, however you one personally defines success. But yeah, that was not easy. That was something I had to learn. And I can think of many other examples like among my peers where if your skill set is not matching what you're trying to do, you're going to have a hard time. Some things, it's just going to be really hard. So I'm not saying to give up. I'm saying try to assess and see, pick and choose certain things.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally, like maximizing your skills and
It's kind of like, it's kind of like asset mapping, as some people talk about. But again, in the arts, it's hard, and you might need an outsider to do that for you, somebody who's more experienced, who can like look at your skills and tell you who has a non-biased opinion and who can actually give you that information. Yeah, it's not, but it's also not clear. It's not like you can like take a test and know like, oh yeah, like these are my, I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's not like we can just do some evaluation. It's a more organic thing than like, I don't know, taking a test to like passing your board exam or something. It's yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and on that, I'm going to hand it back to Elin, who will continue with more.
Well,
Okay.
thank you so much. Yeah, I totally agree. Having a better understanding of your skill sets, and that takes time. That's maturity. That's through your practices. And I wish we could talk a lot more about everything. We are going to be wrapping up soon, but before I do that, we have an audience question, which we'll get to, and I want to talk about your next steps, Stephanie. You have a studio recording of Comfort Girl coming out later in 2025, and we have the trailer. So I was hoping before we show the trailer, which we have queued, can you talk a little bit about this recording, the importance of it, the significance?
Yeah, so Comfort Girl is a piece that I've been working on for many years, and it's a song cycle about the Asian comfort women from World War II. And this history, for those of you who are not familiar, there were over 200,000, and some sources say over 400,000 women, mostly from China and Korea, but from all over Japanese occupied Asia, that were abducted into sexual slavery during World War II by the Japanese army. And they were basically forced to work as sex slaves. And most of them died during the war. There were like over 90% of them were killed or died or committed suicide. And the few who made it back home or survived didn't talk about this. Most of them didn't talk about this for 50 years, and they lived on the outskirts of society. So this history is not well known here. And I personally didn't even learn about it until I was in my mid-20s. So I figured if I, as a Asian American who grew up in New York, didn't know about it, there were probably a lot of other people who didn't know about it either. And then I was inspired to write this piece to like give voice to these women. So the piece is a song cycle about specifically Chinese comfort women. And we've got sort of, it's historical fiction. I mean, it's an amalgamation of a lot of different testimony that I read and a lot of research that I had done. So it incorporates survivor testimony. It's mostly in English. There are some songs in Chinese, and there's a lot of instrumentals. I do have a through line story, but we've been performing the piece since 2019, and finally the studio recording is coming out later this year, which I'm really excited about. And it will just have more, it will give people more of a chance to listen to it. But basically, yeah, it's a story about the comfort women, and it was my first project that looked at something outside of personal identity. It still incorporates my signature sound, my Chinese jazz sound, if you want to call it that, but it's not personal. It's exploring, a historical story. So yeah.
Yep, we're gonna show it right now, and Ellen has it queued up. Thank you, Ellen.
She's the one for me. I knew it from the start. She makes me so happy. Forever she'll be in my heart.
It's too tight. It hurts, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts. This wheelbarrow's cold, 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 so cold. Why did you take me? Why did you take me? Why? I wanna go home, I wanna go home, home.
Rescue, I will rescue you. Rescue, I will rescue you. Baby, I'm coming. Baby, I'm coming.
Sorry, little lady, to tell you this, but there is no way out. It's impossible to escape, no way to run away. There's always someone watching guard.
This is your room number 1.
No shoes, no name, no face, no freedom, no pride, no future, no hope, no life.
Lines, long lines ahead. Waiting for my turn, waiting for my 30 minutes. Lines, long lines of men. I've saved up my salary to come here, blow off some steam with the comfort girls, brag about my power to the other troops. They say that I can't marry a girl who's been where she's been, seen what she's seen. They say she'll ruin my whole world, and there is just no in between. But I still want a mountain home, a place where our kids will roam. Don't say our dream will happen never, 'cause I promised her forever.
I never was a comfort woman, never was a comfort girl. I never was a comfort woman, never was a comfort girl, never was a comfort woman, never was your comfort girl, never was a comfort woman. I am just a girl, I never was a faceless woman. Why is there so much pain in this world? Resist, stand up, fight for your rights. Resist, stand up, fight for what's right. Resist, stand up, fight for what's right. Resist, stand up. No more silence, no more silence.
Wow, thank you, Stephanie. There's a lot of layers to this performance, and of course, the historical significance. Is there anything that you'd like to add to this trailer and share a little bit about when it's going to be coming out? If people want to learn more, how can they learn more?
Sure, yeah. So if you're interested in the piece or want to learn more, the whole piece is available to watch on YouTube. So you can just search my name and YouTube. Also, my website has has some historical. If you want to learn more, there's a whole link to like historical references where you can learn more, and then also the places where I did research for this piece. So it's my website, stephaniechumusic.com, and then / is about Comfort Girl. Or if you just go to the website, it's one of the main tabs there. I think the album, we're getting it mastered now. So I think the album's going to be out towards the end of this year. But we have been performing the piece in its entirety in various locations. So in a few weeks, we're going to do it in Castleton, Vermont. We've done it in New York a few times. We did it in Burlington, Ontario, and at Smith College, and various performing arts centers. Hopefully we can bring it to DC. That would be great. But basically, I'm sort of touring the piece at the same time that we're going to promote the album. And the recording is different than the live version. So in the live version, there's I should mention, there's a through line story that's connected by a narrator. So the two singers sing multiple roles, and there's the projections are happening behind us, and there are some historical photos in there. But it's definitely like a concert / bordering theatrical something. It is in development into a larger opera, and that's many years down the line. But we are at the stage where the American Opera Project has sponsored a libretto reading, which I got a new collaborator to write a new libretto, which completes the story. We have now many characters, but it's a separate piece. It's become a completely separate piece from this song cycle. And so there are not that many artistic works about this topic out there that involve music. There are a few plays, there are some photography exhibits, and certainly some movies. But when I sort of saw that too, I felt like this was it would also contribute. Just there aren't a lot of pieces out there like that. So it just, everything kind of like the tides came together and helped, and it just, the piece has taken on a life of its own, put it that way. When I started with the idea in 2016, I was going to write a 30-minute song cycle that had no through story, just like different vignettes of things that had happened. So this has taken on a whole life of its own and become one of my main projects. Let's see, the full performance is in April, but every time we do a live show, I do include a couple of excerpts. So if you're going to be in New York in May, we've got a big show at Joe's Pub on May 1st, which will be streamed online too. So you can watch it on YouTube. live or later. So we'll include a couple of songs from the piece in that show. And we've got, I'm like, I can't really, I think we're playing in Pittsburgh and Edmonton and we're going to be in Seattle actually in a couple weeks. So we're kind of traveling a bit, and we'll be performing my regular show, which is more of the music that you played earlier, and some of this stuff as well.
That's great. So all of this information with the performances can be found on your website, right, Stephanie?
Yeah, yeah. And if anybody's interested in learning more specifically, feel free to email me or reach out to me directly. My email's on there. You can also sign up for my mailing list to stay up to date on concerts. And then the release of this project will be, yeah, we're currently figuring out the whole plan for how to release it and get it to as many ears as possible, because I really feel that the project in general is beyond just about like me as an artist. It's about trying to get the story of this history out there, especially as most of the survivors are almost all passed away now. So yeah, it's just a personal it feels urgent to me.
Well,
So,
thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, that's very important work, and we did put your website in the chat. So for those of you who didn't hear
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
chat box, and we did have one more audience question.
I see. Yeah. Okay. Can you envision a sound that evokes identity and heritage? Chinese American identity. Yes, yes, definitely. I think that we are working towards a Chinese American sound or an Asian American sound, just globally. I don't even mean jazz. I mean like musically. There's definitely a development of an Asian American musical identity in all different genres of music. I could like suggest names of specific artists that are in jazz or singer-songwriter or other things. So I do think and some artists choose to engage with their identity and heritage more than others. And I also think that it's in the mainstream audience, it's newer. So it could take a long time to sort of develop a specific genre. And then, I mean, do you consider K-pop, for example, to be a part of that? Anyway, I definitely think that there is a specifically Chinese American and broader Asian American sound and movement that's happening in all musical genres. And what does that sound like? I mean, hopefully I'm part of it. And this is one facet of what it sounds like, but I'm sure it's multi-pronged and definitely varying degrees of engagement with culture and heritage. So, to the extent that some of it just isn't at all, or even more like is 100% focused on that. So hopefully that's a broad answer. But if Stan, you are thinking of if you're looking for specific artists or like people, I can send you a message of like certain people I could think of who are doing this kind of work like right now, who are maybe not in the mainstream known on a larger level.
Yeah, that would be very interesting to us. And thank you, Stan, for the great question. And thank you to our audience for the great questions. We are wrapping up, and please, oh, well, thank you.
Oh, thank
Yeah.
you. That's very sweet. But thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you to all of you for being here tonight. I want to thank Stephanie so much for taking time out of her schedule to be with us later in the evening for close to an hour and a half now. And I also want to thank my colleague Lauren for asking the great questions. This was really, we came up with these questions together and with Stephanie to make sure that we capture more of the breadth and depth of her work and her background. Obviously, 90 minutes is not enough to really do that. We could have really dove deeper into each one of these questions. So we would need a lot more time for that. But again, thank you to all of you for joining. And I also want to thank especially the 1882 team, Ted, the executive director, Amy, who was really a great support with all the programs, especially this one, and Ellen for working with us to make this a success and for you guys to enjoy the videos and hear Stephanie's work. So Ted is putting a comment in the chat saying organize
Oh,
invitational.
that's great. Of course I would come. Yeah, that would be so fun.
Yeah, I guess if we had more time, we could have had a jam session right after this for you, anyone who's a night owl. But yeah, thank you for
Oh, thanks, Adrian.
in the chat. Thank you, Adrian.
Yeah.
And if you do have more questions, burning questions or comments, please check out Stephanie's website. And like she said, her contact information is there. And there's a performance coming up in New York City on May the 1st. So if you're in New York City, please, if you have time, check that out. And then hopefully we get to welcome you in DC at some point too, Stephanie. Back to
Yeah. I'm hopefully we'll be back, and I just want to thank everybody for being here and listening to my story and talking to you know, just being able to share with you, and thanks to everybody for having me and all these great questions and holding space with all of you. So thank you.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Stephanie. We learned so much from you today, and it'll be great to pass this on to others.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, well, without further ado, everyone have a good evening. And again, please also check out the 1882's website, 1882foundation.org, and subscribe to the newsletter for the most up-to-date information about the talk stories and future events that Ted mentioned in the beginning. So thank you again, everyone who attended tonight's talk story. This is recorded also, so I believe we'll be uploading this onto the YouTube page so that you could share with others and share Stephanie's
Oh,
work.
great.
Yep. So yeah, please be in touch with us if you have other questions, but otherwise have a good evening and feel free to drop off when you need to.